Now, the United States has welcomed efforts by India and China to resolve the border tensions after the two nations agreed on ways to step back from the deadly 2020 confrontation. The State Department spokesman Matthew Miller said that Washington is very closely following the developments. He said that the United States has discussed the issue with India, but has also clarified that Washington was not involved in negotiations.
So we're closely following the developments. We understand that both countries have taken initial steps to withdraw troops from friction points along the line of actual control. We welcome any reduction in tensions along the border.
According to reports, the disengagement of the Indian and the Chinese armies from Dipsang and Demchok in eastern Ladakh is almost complete, with both sides carrying out joint validation of the troop and equipment withdrawal to a mutually agreed distance from the standoff sides. Last week, India and China had worked out non-hostile patrolling arrangements in the area to disengage their militaries. Now, China and India have disputes over their 3,500-kilometer frontier, which came to a head in 2020 with a skirmish in the Himalayan region that killed at least about 20 Indian and 4 Chinese soldiers. Now, the agreement came shortly before the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi and the Chinese President Xi Jinping met for the very first time in over 5 years on the sidelines of a BRICS summit in Russia. The United States has been building ties with India for more than 2 decades, and Washington considers New Delhi as a natural partner due to shared concerns over the rise of China. This year, the United States approved a $4 billion sale of state-of-the-art drones to India that could be used for surveillance in the border areas. So this, of course, is the big developing story that we are tracking at the moment, where the United States has reacted to the talks between India and China for disengagement. And the United States has said that it has welcomed the efforts by India and China to resolve the border tensions after the two nations agreed on ways to step back from the eyeball-to-eyeball confrontation that they'd been locked with in the Ladakh region. Now, the State Department spokesperson Matthew Miller said that Washington is very closely following the developments. He also said that the United States has discussed the issue with India, but has also clarified that Washington was not involved in the negotiations. Now, according to reports, the disengagement of the Indian and the Chinese troops from Dipsang and Demchok in eastern Ladakh is almost complete. These two were the pain points in the negotiations, the Dipsang Plains and the Demchok. Both sides are reportedly carrying out joint validation of the troop and equipment withdrawal to a mutually agreed distance from the standoff sides. The last week, India and China had worked out non-hostile patrolling arrangements in the area to disengage their militaries. Now, China and India have disputes over their 3,500-kilometer frontier, which came to a head in 2020 with a skirmish in the Himalayas that resulted in the deaths of at least about 20 Indian soldiers. And to give us more perspective on this, we're being joined by WION's Siddhant Simal, who's joining us live in this broadcast. Siddhant, tell us, what is this moment happening in terms of the American reaction to the recent developments that have taken place between India and China, where the talks have been pretty successful in setting out the protocol in which the two nations will carry out the disengagement at the Ladakh sector?
Well, Mohammed, first let me give you a brief of the situation at the line of actual control. Now, both sides had said that disengagement in Depsang and Demchok will be completed. So essentially what has happened so far is the process of verification has started, and patrolling will start by tomorrow, which is, of course, a very good news in terms of India-China relationship. And we have seen global reactions. Now, coming to your question in terms of the U.S. reactions, we know that yesterday the State Department in its briefing said that it welcomes the situation when it comes to the border area, and the Indian side has briefed the American side on a regular basis when it comes to situation at the border. We know the American side and the Indian side were on same page when it comes to the Chinese aggressiveness at the line of actual control with India. And for almost 4.5 years, we know the situation remained tense. The situation has eased out with the disengagement process underway in Demchok and Depsang, but essentially more needs to be done. There are areas in Arunachal Pradesh as well bordering with China where there are issues that needs to be resolved. So it's an ongoing process, but the American side has welcomed, and not only just the American side, the Russian side has also welcomed. The Russian ambassador Denis Alipov earlier this week in a briefing here in Delhi said that he welcomes the process that started in Kazan. Kazan is the city in Russia where the BRICS summit happened, and both the Indian Prime Minister and the Chinese President had their first in-person bilateral meeting after a gap of 5 years.
Right. Now, and also, Siddhant, this is an interesting power play that is currently underway. The United States and China do not see eye to eye on many issues. The United States is doing everything that it possibly can to put together an alliance of nations to try and confront China. With that being the context, how does the United States view the fact that India and China are patching up and are resolving many of the issues for which there have been disagreements for the last several years?
Well, two aspects to it, not just United States, but global capitals. In fact, capitals in the region were closely watching the developments in terms of India-China thaw, because what we have seen in past few months and almost 1 year is not only the American side engaging with the Chinese, but also Australians. In fact, the Philippines has also been engaging with the Chinese. The only country which was not seen publicly engaging with China was India, and it looks like there was a back channel diplomacy happening between India and China that led to the in-person meeting between the two leaders, the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi and the Chinese President Xi Jinping. The second, of course, is in terms of the outcomes, the development happening at a time when, of course, we are just waiting for a week's time before the elections in United States conclude, and there will be a new president. So essentially, when it comes to the position of both Donald Trump and Kamala Harris, it will be impacting the global dynamics, including US-China relationship and, of course, the bilateral relationship between different countries. So before that, it looks like the Indian and the Chinese thought that it's better to have some kind of conversation before the new regime comes in Washington.
All right, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you very much indeed, Siddhant, for joining us and giving us that perspective there. For all the latest news, download the WION app and subscribe to our YouTube channel.